Let's explore the importance of communication and how it affects employee efficiency. If you think about it, communication is really the neural network for any business. Now, in humans and animals in general, the neural network or the neural pathway is the topology of neurons on our brain that is created as we learn anything. There could be information, it could be a skill, etc. And as we learn something, those neurons connect in new ways in our brain, and then they get more robust and they get healthier. That information flows more efficiently, which is why as we improve on a technique, a physical technique, can be anything like running or throwing a ball, eating, it doesn't really matter, anything that's physical. As we improve, those neural networks become more and more robust, and that pathway becomes more and more robust and stronger, more implemented, which of course means as time goes by, it makes it more difficult to change it because we have it ingrained in us, literally physically ingrained in our being, but not impossible. In business, communication serves that same exact purpose. As information flows throughout the organization to various team members, various elements, think of that like cells in the body for the business. And what happens is that communication gets codified. The way we communicate becomes codified. In many businesses, it's not really healthy, right? So think of it as somebody who's unathletic, and so they're very clumsy. They don't function pretty well, but they can still walk. They could even run. We've all seen runners like that whose sort of feet are flying out inefficiently off to the side, or perhaps their arm swing is going across their body instead of pumping forward and back. And they're tense instead of relaxed. You compare that visual to perhaps the visual of a professional runner, a Usain Bolt as a sprinter, or a marathoner who has this sort of relaxed gait. Everything is coordinated and moving much, much more efficiently because the neural pathways in our brain are set up to do that. So what does it take for us to change or improve our communication, which is the same thing we need to do when we want to improve physically? And it takes what I call crystal clear communication. We have to start off with thinking about what is the information we need to know. Now, there have been a lot of studies on visualization in athletes where underperforming athletes are taught to visualize, think about what proper technique looks like. Or in some cases, there are athletes who perhaps perform well in practice, but not in actual competition. They're taught to visualize. And when I say visualize, conceptualize is probably a better idea because they're actually in all aspects, sight, smell, sound, all sensory aspects. They try and immerse themselves mentally into what competition looks like. And then they teach themselves to relax, which is in effect training new neural pathways for them. And the studies have universally shown an improvement in performance when you do that. So if we're having trouble communicating in the office, if things are going awry, and that's the symptom, right? Again, underperforming. In business, things aren't happening the way you want them to. You're asking people to do something 2 or 3 times. You're missing deadlines. You have poor quality. All of these things are indicative of bad communication. So we have to start with why. In other words, people need to understand why their actions are important and why they are doing what they're doing. There are no positions in your company that are unimportant, from the least paid person, whether they're a janitor or maintenance person, to the CEO. If it's an unimportant position, you don't have it in your company. So people need to understand how they're contributing to the bigger picture. And then what is expected of them. When you communicate, you want to really get down to the nitty-gritty. Why are you doing it? What is it that is expected? And when you think about what, not how to do it, although that will come, but more like, what does success look like? In other words, when this thing, this evolution we'll call it, is complete, how will you know that they've done it successfully? And explain that to them, what you will be looking for to say, yes, this was done correctly, so that they can evaluate it for themselves. The next thing we have to then think about is the who. In other words, who are we talking about? Is it an individual? Is it a team? Is it multiple individuals, each contributing? Right? Whatever the who is, who needs to know it? And then the how. The how isn't necessarily how to do it, although it might be. If you have good procedures and processes in place, and what we're communicating is following an existing process or procedure, you've already communicated the how through your training. However, if this is a one-off, an exception to whatever your standard might be, then how is it different? How do you expect or recommend it changing? Although, frankly, it's better to communicate to them how it's different and solicit from them first what they think needs to change, because that will teach them, against teaching neural netways, it will teach them to think and react positively, because it gives you a chance to then question their thinking and understand how their thought process is, so that if they're right on track, very well, this is good, etc. But if they're off track, off base, it gives you a chance then to really dig into their thinking process and reveal to them some areas they may not have considered. But the other piece of how is, how are you going to communicate it? If you communicate it verbally, or you can communicate it in written form. Today we're inundated with forms of communication: email, text, various direct messaging, group messaging like Slack. You might have some sort of internal messaging, voicemail. Again, smoke signals. There could be letters, written, physical, actual snail mail, and each one has its strength and weakness depending on time, frequency, how long you want it to last, et cetera. So you really want to think about that. What kind of record do you want to keep? What's the urgency, et cetera, before you communicate stuff. And if we do all this accurately, you're going to end up with a good result. And better still, you're going to have a process for communication that you can iterate and improve upon. And as your communication gets better, your results are going to get better. I'm reminded of when I was in flight training, actually in training in the F-14. I already earned my wings, and now we're training in the F-14 how to do intercepts. And we were learning 1 versus 2 intercept training. So 2 bad guys are coming at us. We're a lone fighter out there. How do we position the intercept? Because we still have to do it, even though we're outnumbered, in such a way as to maximize our possibility of a win. And one of the keys is to make sure that we attack their formation from the outside. So we're only ever facing one fighter. Thinking about it like if you're fighting 2 people at once, you don't want one on either side of you, right? You don't know which way to turn. You want to be on the outside of that fight where you can see both of them at the same time. So you want to position yourself in such a way. So as we're approaching the intercept, and I have both bogeys on my radar, I went to lock the outside or the inside fighter so we can be outside of them. Okay. And I accidentally locked the wrong one. Now I was in training and I knew I screwed up. I could have kept my mouth shut and hoped and prayed that it worked out. But instead, I told this pilot, who was an instructor pilot who was grading me, I said, I've locked the wrong fighter. Well, we engaged them, we went back, and we debriefed afterwards. And what would have been a fail, had I not said that, turned into a pass. And actually, it was an above average, because I had the situational awareness and the wherewithal, the thought process to let my pilot know. By the time we locked the fighter, it was too late to unlock and re-engage with a proper lock. But by letting them know, we were able to then maneuver the aircraft in such a way that offset the deficit. Crystal clear communication is the key to success in your business. Why are they doing it? What is it that success looks like? Who needs to know? How are you going to tell them? Join the Radical Accountability Movement. Watch the next video right here and subscribe so you never miss a tactical breakthrough with Locked On Leadership.